It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop podcast. I'm Brian Sword. This week, I had an interview with guitarist Stuart Smith from Heaven and Earth. As always, we went through his entire career and learned lots of great stuff. Here we go, my conversation with Stuart Smith. I'd like to start these interviews with, where were you born and what kind of musical family did you grow up in?
Well, I was born in York in England, and my father was a jet fighter pilot, so we moved every couple of years, so I don't have the sort of broad Yorkshire accent. And I'm, as far as music goes, my grandfather on my father's side, he worked down the coal mines in Northumberland, but at night he would play in bands. He played drums, piano, guitar, anything just to sort of make ends meet. And so I sort of picked up in my early days, a few musical things from him. Then when I was about 7, I started violin lessons, and that lasted a little while until I saw someone, one of the other guys playing guitar and getting all the attention from the girls. So I thought, well, that's for me. So I started playing guitar.
And what were your early bands?
Well, I played with quite a few bands. I had, first one that really turned professional was Sidewinder. And that was when I was about 17, 18. Mm-hmm. And toured all over England, some states in Europe and this kind of thing. And then had some various other bands around Europe, Informer, French Kiss, God, what else was that? Stallion, believe it or not. I know, yeah, the name. In those days, it was cool. That was in those days. That was a cool name. Anyway, yeah. So then I tried to get a band together with Ian Pace when Purple broke up. Played with various people around the London scene, and it was just very tough at the time because around 82, 83, it was all dance music, and yeah. Duran Duran and this kind of thing. And so, in England being as small as it is, if you're not playing the sort of music that is in fashion, you starve. And it was then that Richie Blackmore came over with Rainbow. He'd had a hit with I Surrender with Joe Lynn Turner, and he was doing a tour, and we were hanging out on that. And he said, "Look, why don't you move to the States? It's so big that even if your music's not in fashion, there's always an audience for it." So that's what happened. I moved to the States in '83. In Long Island, and got my own place out there, and then ended up going off when Richie reformed Deep Purple, went off on tour to Australia with him, and over to Germany when they were Mixed Perfect Strangers, and I was there when they were recording it as well, actually. And then I went back to England in '85 to do an album. Then '86 I moved to LA, and I've been here ever since.
Now, where does the connection come from with Deep Purple? Because it's a strong one, and Richie Blackmore.
Yeah, I mean, when I was about 14, I think, some friends of my parents, they asked if I wanted to go to see a rock concert, and I went, no, not really. I was a classical snob, I was playing classical music, and then my parents said, oh, go and get out of the house, give us some peace. So I went, and the last band of the night was Deep Purple, and suddenly this guy dressed in black, I'm right down the front, this guy dressed in black comes running to the front and just playing these incredible classical runs with so much emotion, so much volume, just blew my mind. So that turned me on to electric guitar, and I started playing electric guitar, and I'd go and see Deep Purple at every chance I got. And eventually someone that I was with knew someone, and we got invited back to this party at this big house, and I met Richie, and we got on very well. And I'd see him when he came over to England to tour, because he was living in the States at the time. And then, as I say, when I went over there to the States, we'd get together all the time. And even when I moved to LA, I used to go and spend Christmases with him. And I credit him with mentoring me a lot on my playing, not just technique, but also just attitude towards it.
Yeah. And you still close?
I haven't spoken to Richie for a while. He's went off and did his medieval thing and sort of lost touch with everybody.
Yeah.
Effort to try and get in touch with him again.
So you moved to LA, and is that when Aliens of Extraordinary Ability, is that when that started?
No. When I first moved out here, the first person I got introduced to by a guy called Mel Baster was Steve Priest from The Sweet. And we got together and started putting this version of Sweet together. Didn't go very far, but it was just, we could never find the musicians that would give it the time of day, basically. So I went off and did my own thing. I formed a band under various names, which was sort of the beginning of, it was called Midnight, and that was sort of the beginnings of Heaven and Earth, and I started writing towards everything. And then, I can't remember what year it was, but Steve Priest contacted me again about getting Sweet back together. It was being spearheaded by John Coletta, who used to manage Deep Purple. And he had contacted, they went and saw Brian Connolly in London and Mick Tucker. And this was sort of pretty much planned. And at the time, I ran into Keith Emerson, and he was getting, and we'd met before I knew Cozy very well, obviously through the Ritchie connection. And when Cozy was playing with Emerson, Lake and Powell at the time, I ran into him in Stringfellows, and they were having dinner with Keith Emerson. They asked me to join them. I met Keith, and so I ran into him again at the House of Blues in Los Angeles, and came back to my house, and I was playing some classical. He said, well, we should get a band together to warm up for these tours we got to do. So we formed the Aliens of Extraordinary Ability, which had myself, Richie Onori on drums, Marvin Sperling on bass, and it was intended that Kelly Hansen was going to be the singer of this. And we had a party, because at the time we were just an instrumental band, and we had a party at Richie's place, and the idea was to give Kelly a try, and he came along and got bored with the fact that we were doing like 5-minute solos each. So,
and what year would this have been?
I'm trying to work it out now. It was about 95, something like that, I think.
Oh, okay.
And so Kelly sort of got bored and wandered off, and Robbie Wyckoff, who's now the singer for Roger Waters, he sort of was at the party, and he picked up the mic and just started singing, and so he sort of got the gig. And then, of course, the Brian Connolly died, sadly, and that took the wind out of the sails of the Sweet reunion, and Keith went off to do the ELP reunion tour with Jethro Tull. And I went back to concentrating on what was called Heaven and Earth at the time. And during the time of playing with Keith Emerson, we were approached by Samsung, the Korean electronics giant. They had a deal over here with a company to bring out 6 artists, signed 6 artists. And it was a good deal. They were going to be distributed by WEA and everything else. So they saw me, they saw us playing with Keith, and they said, would we sign to them? And we said, no, we can't. I mean, basically, it's not a real band. It's Keith's leaving and I'm leaving. So when this sort of all fell to bits for me with the Sweet thing, I went down to a club called the Baked Potato, and every Tuesday night there's this band called the Screaming Cocktail Hour, which was Teddy Andreas, the keyboard player of Guns N' Roses, and Almira Katani, the guitarist of B.B. Chung King. And they called this the Screaming Cocktail Hour, which I think was the greatest name for a band ever. And they would play at this tiny bar, and it's amazing who would come down. I mean, Paul Rogers would come down and get up and jam. Steve Lukather, Slash, Steve Winwood came down after he played the Universal Amphitheatre and sat in. I mean, he's just these amazing players. I'd go down there with Howard Leese a lot, and we'd hang in and harass the guys, and we'd get up and play. And it was more blues-based, but it was a lot of fun. And one night I got up, and the guys from Samsung that had offered us the deal for the Aliens, which we turned down, they were there because they'd signed Teddy, the keyboard player, to a solo album. And they saw me play, and afterwards they wanted their photo taken with me, and we were chatting, and the bar closed, and they wanted to have another drink, and so did I. So we all went back to my house, and they heard some of my solo stuff that I'd done over the years. They said, well, we'd like to sign you. So they basically offered me a deal. It took 3 months to actually, from the day they offered it, to sign the damn thing. But
oh, wow.
Yeah, well, they kept on stalling. I mean, I don't know what it was. I mean, I was having the guests lined up and everything else, um, and in the end, I manufactured in Photoshop a letter from JVC, who were their arch enemies, and manufactured a
Brilliant.
Photoshop saying for a slightly larger amount, and I showed this to them the following day, and they went, "Oh, okay." So they signed me the very next day.
Oh, genius.
Bit of leverage there, and it worked.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting. It's interesting because when that record came out, like I was very surprised to see Samsung, and I don't recall really much sense by Samsung. Was that just a short-lived deal for them?
well, what happened was, I mean, it was going to be a big event. I mean, a huge thing because they had WEA. They had a $20 million distribution deal with WEA, which I mean, they were really serious about this. And halfway through recording the album, the Asian economy collapsed. So they lost their distribution deal with WEA. So they just released it in Korea. That was it. And it was actually, I mean, in the terms of the contract that I had, because I reasonably know the music business well, I made sure this was in there. But if they didn't release it in other territories, because this is how albums just die.
Yeah.
If they didn't release it in other territories, the rights would revert back to me. And at the time, my brother-in-law was Richie Sambora, so he got Bon Jovi's lawyers onto it and got me the rights back.
Interesting, because I remember there was multiple versions that came out at the time,
Well, there was
extra tracks and whatnot.
It was the Samsung one, and but it was just. I mean, I bought copies. They just released it in Korea, so I bought copies and sold them off my webpage at the time, and sold 8,000 copies, which is, you know, that was no real big deal. It's a big deal now because everything's free, but at the time, this was before CD burning and file sharing. So then Frontiers offered me a deal for Europe, and Richie Sambora was talking about the album in Japan, so they heard about it, and they Pony Canyon offered me a deal. So it got. Okay. So we brought out the same version again with an extra couple of bonus tracks, and it came out in Europe and Japan, and nothing really with the States. And then it sort of became an underground hit. Frontiers offered me a deal for a second album, and then I think in 2004. I opened up my own record company with Richie Onori, and we re-released it with a few bonus tracks because it was never released in the States.
And all the guests on that was a ton of guests on it. And was that a record label trying to help with marketing, or was that your own decision that you wanted to have all your friends on it?
No, what happened was they offered me the deal, and I didn't have a band. I mean, I'd had this. The Heaven and Earth thing. In fact, the last version of it before that was with Kelly Hansen, Jay Shellen, Ray Rodriguez, who played keyboards on some of it, and a guy called Hart Palmer. And that sort of fell to bits when the financial backing we had dried up, and that's when I started to get the Sweet thing back together. Then I ended up playing with Emerson and so on and so on. And what was the original question? I've lost it.
Yeah, it was about all the guests because standard kind of marketing ploy is to bring in a bunch of guests, but this one seemed a little more sincere. Like it seemed like you got all your friends in and you made a record.
Yeah, this was actually the first time anyone had really done it. I think in our sort of genre. It was very sincere. I just didn't have a band, so I mean, everyone else that I had the Heaven and Earth thing with before had sort of disappeared. So I just called. My first call was Richie Sambora because he was at the time my brother-in-law. I was married to Heather Lockley's sister, Colleen, and I just said, "Hey, Rich, I've got this deal for the solo album. Would you be willing to sing on it?" And he said, "Sing? No one ever asked me to sing. I'd love to."
Yeah.
Because I love his voice. He's got the most amazing.
Oh, he's one of my favorites too. Yeah, he's a brilliant singer.
I'm so glad he's gone up on his own out of Bon Jovi. I mean, personally, I think it's killing him. I mean, I've always said that if he goes off on his own, he'd be our next Clapton with that voice and his way he plays.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just a great all-round superb musician and super nice guy as well.
And it just seems the last 10 years in that band, he's just kind of, he doesn't feel like a partner anymore.
No, well, it's the John.
Yeah.
So I mean, I saw them in Santiago. Richie and I had dinner after the show, but I mean, it was all about John. I mean, he's doing his Elvis impersonations and everything, and I never get these bands. It's like who replace a member, and all of a sudden that when the pictures are taken, it's like Bon Jovi. They replace the bass player. This guy's been in the band like donkey's years. He's been like 20 years or something, but they never photograph with him. And on stage, he's put at the back behind monitors. That is not a band. That's like it's like an Elvis. You've got the Elvis and you have the band behind little back behind monitors. It's not an interactive band. Now, U2 did the same thing, I think, didn't they? No, they've got the original members. Someone else. The Stones.
I think they're all original, yeah.
Yeah, Stones have got the bass player Daryl, and I mean he's not a photograph with them or anything, and he's been in there donkey's years, and he's an integral part. So I just never get it when bands do that, and I think Richie was very much being treated by John as a sideman. And this is I'm guessing at this, and from what Richie has said in latest interviews, but I mean it's what it is. I mean, and as well, I mean, John, I think, is a workaholic. I mean, the guy, he does an album, he goes on tour, there's no break, they go straight in and do another album and go on tour again. What's he doing it for? I mean, firstly, you're burning out the band. He doesn't need the money. It's just, I mean, I remember talking to Richie about Deep Purple. He said, the management just kept us working and working and working. And after we'd done an album and tour, if they'd have said, after three, all right, all of you go away for 3 months, relax, have a holiday and everything else, it would have kept the band together. But when you're that on top of each other and exhausted from working. So anyway, I mean, Richie's had enough, and he wanted to spend time with his daughter, and he's doing that. And he said, this is the first time I've had 3 months off in my life. And, you can't work a band together like that. You lose the creativity, you lose the spark. So anyway, Richie, I called him, and he said, I'd love to. I love his voice. And then Joe Lintona was the second call. After that, it was just sort of like a domino effect. Everyone wanted to be on it. And so it was sincerely put together. It was just, and the studio was sort of a very party atmosphere. We had Pat Reagan's studio in the center of Hollywood. And we also had loads of booze there. So every time anyone would finish a gig, they'd come and hang out to see what was going on at the studio. So he said, all right, you're here, you play some piano, go and sing or something. So it was a blast. We had a great time doing that album. But that was sort of the one that started it all.
Now, at the time, like I said, big Kelly Hansen fan, so I bought everything with him on it. So, and you probably know where I'm going with this, but I bought an album by Unruly Child. It came out exactly the same time, or within a few months, I think, and was a little astonished to hear the same song that on your record. What was that all about?
As was I. We actually demoed that up a long, long time ago. Before it was, Joe Lintona brought it to me. It was written by Bobby Held and Alan Greenwood, the keyboard player Foreigner. And Joe Lynn had done a version of it. He did, and I thought that's a great song. And originally that's what I gave to Richie Sambora to sing. And he just felt it wasn't right for him. He was in the studio, and Kelly, he couldn't get his head around it. And Kelly said, "Well, this is how it goes," because Kelly had sang it with me before. So Kelly sang it, and Richie goes, "Well, you should do it." So Richie just played guitar on it. But Kelly, then he got a deal for this Unruly Child thing, and they decided to do a copy. And I was pissed at Bobby Held, because he's the one who sort of facilitated this and gave permission, because if it's not released, you have to get permission from the artist to cover it. And it was just, I thought it was a real conflict of interest, especially having the same singer on there.
And did Kelly know, or did he just show up in the studio one day and get told, "Oh, sing this"?
I've no idea. He'd sung ours first, so I've no idea what with that. But that was it. And
interesting.
It was a good song, and they just felt it could be a hit, and it could have been a huge song back in the day. It was just back in when I released this album, it was the wrong time for any of this music, really.
Which is a shame.
Yeah, it really is. But I mean, we're making a concerted effort right now to try and bring this back to the forefront. We've got a deal with Bruce Cordo that we could. That, I mean, who's got the money to rival the majors in promotion and this kind of thing.
And we'll definitely get to that.
Okay.
So you got a deal for Frontiers for this record, and I guess it was a two record deal then, because your next record came out on Frontiers as well.
No, it was open. They offered me.
I see.
They offered me the next deal, and I said yes, and we did an album with Kelly Keeling.
Mm-hmm. And so why not Kelly Hansen? Why the vocalist switch? He seemed to be your touring. You did a few shows on this record, I recall. I think you played one in Canada, up in Edmonton, and I think you had Kelly Hansen, right?
That's correct. Yeah, he was tied up with something. He was doing. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was. What's his name from Poison? C.C. DeVille.
Oh, C.C. DeVille. I remember he was in a band with him for a while. Yeah.
It might have been that. I mean, because I would have used Kelly, but I know he was tied up with something.
I see.
So, or I think, didn't he get it might have been a Frontiers, he got a Frontiers deal for something. I'm not sure. So I found
possibly, yeah.
I found this ridiculous when I was out in, we played the Gods Festival in England with Kelly singing. And we're having breakfast the next day with the guys from Frontier. And they said to him, well, Kelly, why don't you get Hurricane back together? We'll offer you a deal. I'm going, what are you doing, you idiot? This is the singer I've been going out with. That was a dumb move in my... Anyway, so Kelly was doing something, and Kelly Keeling came into the picture, and we worked with him.
Frontiers at the time, they've been around for a while, but they weren't big like they are now with, all these Whitesnake and Journey and whatnot, and then very good distribution now in North America. I think they got a distribution with Universal, at least in Canada they do. But at that time they were still kind of up and coming. What was it like working with them at that time?
It was great. I mean, they were basically a bunch of fans, which is they managed to get it together to put a record company together. And there's nothing better than having people that are in charge of your label that are fans of the music. Unlike some of the majors, they can't stand the artists that are on their label. But no, these guys were just big fans and very enthusiastic and everything else.
And what was the process like of recording that record?
It was weird because we built the drummer Richie Honori at his house. We built a recording studio. We had a room where we had a PA system set up, and we could go and play in there in sort of the basement, which is soundproofed, and then the control room in the house. And we were using something called the Paris system to record on, and I was the only one who sort of knew how to do this, and Marvin Sperling came in, the bass player, and he sort of worked with me on it. But we sort of muddled through, but that's why there's very poor production on this, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We made it work, but we didn't know anything about sort of compressing files or optimizing it. So
yeah.
But we got it done, and it came out. But it was a bit of a struggle because the computer, there's what do you call it? When you record something on Pro Tools and you've said, all right, that's the take, you render the file so it sort of makes one file as opposed to all these layers and everything. Now, we didn't know anything about this, and there's no one told us. So we had like so many files, probably about 2,000 files in the song. I think the computer was like struggling to run. I mean, when we were doing a mix, we thought we'd never get through it without it crashing. But we did. I mean, like I said, we got it done. And it's an interesting album. I mean, I like some of the play. I listened to that, go back and listen to it, and I like some of the playing on there and the ideas.
Yeah, I like that record too. And did you tour on that?
No, we played a few shows, but working with Kelly Keeling sort of became a bit unworkable. And then we got back together with Kelly Hansen again and went out with him.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, Kelly Keeling's, there's been some reports of like Firefest behavior this year and stuff, that he's been having some troubles.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, he's a very talented guy, but just screwed up. I mean,
yeah.
You've got to make a decision of whether you want to do music or get high.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I mean, like I said, he's a talented guy. And he's deep at heart, he's a nice guy, but it gets lost in all the sort of whatever he's doing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I got tired of dealing with it when we had Heaven and Earth.
Now, I recall around that time seeing in the media that you were starting a label, and I think you had signed Howard Leese.
That's correct.
Yeah. What happened there?
Well, we started the label. We the first product we released was the Heaven and Earth album. We released this as a reissue for the States, because we had distribution in the States, and then we signed Howard Leese, and it's just I keep running into these problems. It was like when we had the deal with Samsung, the Asian economy collapsed. Well, this time. The whole CD burning and file sharing took off in full flight, and Tower went out, who are our biggest clients. Tower, biggest customers, went out of business. I mean that killed it. I mean, we weren't well enough up on digital distribution, which no one was at the time, really. I mean, it was still a new frontier, and unfortunately, we just couldn't survive it. I mean, that was, and now it's even worse. I mean, you bring out an album, the next day it's available free from some Russian site.
Yeah, if it doesn't come out, a month before from some kind of leak.
Yeah. Well, we were pretty careful with that, but I mean, it's just that sort of killed the label. I mean, Howard's album, we basically gave him the advance, and we couldn't release it. So, and Howard's one of my best friends, so he got an offer from Frontier. So I said, look, just take it. There's nothing we can do.
Yeah, I recall that. And I figured that was the same record when that came out.
Yeah.
At that point, you kind of reset and come back to, was it, no, wait, you were in Sweet for a while. You Sweet reformed. Was that what happened next?
That's right. Well, we started to play out with Heaven and Earth, with Kelly Hansen, and it started to get noticed. I mean, the band was pretty kick-ass. Kelly's, of course, is a great singer, great frontman. Is Irish, but we won't go into that. So we always rag on each other. So we lost Kelly to Foreigner.
Yeah.
Couldn't find anyone to really replace him. He's a great singer, great frontman, and there was no one out there at the time that I felt was right for Heaven and Earth. And Steve Priest, during all this, called me up and said, hey, do you feel like giving Sweet another shot? And I thought, all right, let's do it. So we got Joe Retter in, and Richie and Noreen, Stevie Stewart, and it just sort of took off. We started playing these festivals to 10, 20,000 people and that kind of thing. And it seemed to start getting a bit of traction. And we went on for a few years doing that, toured South America with Journey and this kind of thing. But Steve Priest didn't want to move forward, and originally I got a deal for Sweet to do a new album. And he just didn't want to do it. Just didn't think it would sell and all this kind of thing. So the head of the record company, Bruce Quarto, said, well, look, why don't you do another Heaven and Earth album? Much prefer you do. So that's what we did.
And what was it like for you in Sweet? All of a sudden, you're not playing your songs, but you're playing to big crowds. How was that?
It was a lot of fun at first. I mean, it was great. I mean, we're playing to a lot of people and making a decent living, and I could sort of get away with certain mannerisms of my own, put my own slant on things. But there's certain things that there's a framework you have to follow. But I got a chance to sort of let loose on some things like Set Me Free and Windy City. But it was a blast, but it wasn't going anywhere. I mean, basically, we went to Europe once, but we couldn't really go to Europe because Andy Scott had his version of it over there, and he tied up Europe and Australia, and we were just playing around the States. So it became very much a sort of weekend warrior thing, and I wanted to do a new album. I think that's where we'd have the writing ability to sort of make some, try and get it to the next level. But as I say, Steve, please do it.
At this point, you reform Heaven and Earth. Obviously, some of the same players from Sweet, and then you start working on a new record. On first listen of the record, and some of the artwork, and then the music video that came out, I was kind of astonished at the fact that this does not look like a home recorded Pro Tools record, as you called your previous one. This seemed like there was a lot of money spent on it.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I mean, basically, this is my friend Bruce, and he said at the time, "Why doesn't Sweet do a new album?" And I said, "Well, the record companies just nowadays will not give you enough to go and do it properly. They'll give you like 30 grand or something, but it's not enough to really do
No.
a first class album. If you're going to bring out something with a legacy act like that, it's got to be first class." And he said, "Well, what do you need?" And Bruce is like got more money than God. He's got like three Ferraris, Lamborghini, mansion up in the hills, beach house on Newport. And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, to do it properly, you're talking about 75 grand." He said, "Well, I'll back that." So Steve Prish didn't want to do it. And he said, "Why don't you do another Heaven and Earth one? I much prefer it." So we started writing on this, and we started doing it. And when he heard the first songs, he said, "Well, why do we need a record company?" And I said, "Well, you don't, but they've got the marketing infrastructure, they've got the distribution, the publicity department, and this kind of thing." And he said, "Well, is it possible to do it on your own?" I said, "Well, yeah, you can hire all these people and have someone sort of quarterback it and manage them all. But I mean, just to get a band noticed at all, you're talking about $1 million." And he said, "So?" So we went. I said, "Well, then, to take it out on the road, you're talking about another $1 million." And this is just to just make. And he said, "So?" So we just started down this path, and we hired all the top publicists, the top marketing teams, and Glenn Wexler to come in and do the artwork, and he brought in a team to do the video. Very fortunate position, and one of the things that Bruce said at the beginning, he said, "Look, I don't want this album to be great. I want this album to be phenomenal. So when you go in and record it, if you feel the next day you could do better, I don't care how long it takes, how much it costs, go and do it again." That's a dangerous thing to say to some musicians like us. It's we're never satisfied, so you just go in and keep doing it.
How long was the recording process on it?
14 months.
Whew.
Yeah, it's well you see, that's when I say that's also the writing process. So when I mean, it took us probably about a month to put the band together, just getting all the right players, the combination with the chemistry right, and then there was a lot of writing. We'd go in there and we'd start playing. We'd go into the Ritchie studio, into the noise room as we call it, and we'd all start playing. And Joe Retta would record it on a little 4-track with a couple of mics up, and then he'd make MP3s, and everyone would listen to those. He'd send them to everyone, they'd listen to them, and we'd go back in again and refine the songs. And we wouldn't record any song till we really felt it couldn't be worked on anymore. I mean, that was the in our opinion, the best we could get it. And it's funny because just talking to Bruce said it the other day, it's like, it seems like it's been so long, but at the end of the day, this album hasn't even been out a year yet. A journalist had asked me, was I satisfied with the sort of progress? And I thought, yeah, for an album that hasn't been out, we released it on April the 23rd last year. So for an album that hasn't been out a year yet, we've done pretty well. It does seem, like I said, Bruce and I were talking, it does seem longer for us because you had the 14 months before that where we were doing recording and mixing and doing videos and all this kind of thing.
And how was the process of shooting the video? Because, it is not your standard 4 guys in a room playing. There is some serious production value on that thing.
Oh, yeah. It's weird. It was all green screen. I mean, when I've done videos before, I'm used to sort of standing on a stage with a mock crowd in front of you to sort of give it some. So you're just standing in this studio with like nothing but green behind you. Except for the what was it? The I don't know what love is. Where I'm on this mountaintop. They created this mountaintop which was about 12 foot high, and I had to stand on top of this. But it's in the middle of summer. It's boiling up there. I'm saying, can someone put some fans on here? And I'd like, plus it's precarious. It's like you can't really move around when you're up at that height and this tiny little mountaintop you're meant to be standing on. It was a lot of fun. I mean, we were there. we were not really there for a lot of it. I mean, I would drop in and see it all going on, but most of it was done in this big mansion, and the green stuff. We all came down to do that.
Now I understand you guys have a tour coming up of England. Now I've seen Arlen play once in LA with Richie Kotzen, and his gear took up half the stage. It was quite a sight, and he puts on a hell of a show. But what's that process going to be like to go to England? Because I understand that he won't tour without his gear, and that can cause some problems.
No, we're gonna do. I mean, Arlen's just so damn good. I mean, he's like, when he plays, he's like a Hendrix on the Hammond. I mean, this guy's incredible.
Oh, he's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's just phenomenal. He just plugs in, it becomes part of that thing. So, I mean, I love the Hammond as well. I always have done. Not only bands like Deep Purple, but I always just love the sound of the Hammond, that rich, warm sound. And you get these keyboards who say, "Yes, we've recreated the Hammond sound." I'm like, "No, you haven't."
No, not at all.
Anything like it. And they're close, but I mean, a Hammond you've got all the drawbars and this kind of thing. And so, yeah, we'll be supplying, we'll be getting the equipment for Arlen. I mean, it's a necessary part of having Arlen in the band. And you know, it certainly makes up for it with the show he puts on and what he comes out with.
Oh, totally. And are you planning on doing more touring, or is that all you have lined up for now?
No, these are just the anchor dates. We've been trying to get over to Europe for a while, but everyone was reluctant. They're saying, you know, to get us out to just flying a band out from LA. But now the O2 organization has booked us for this English tour. All the other sort of festivals and everything else, we're getting offers now. So we've.
Oh yeah, okay. Once you're there, it's a little easier.
Yes, because we've got the anchor dates now. So we've been offered the Montreux Jazz Festival, so we're leaving right after the British dates to go over to Montreux and play that the following weekend. And then we've got the agent who's now working on filling that month or 6 weeks up, and we'll be out there for as long as we can.
Great. And what about North America? Any plans to tour here?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, again, we've got an agent out here who's working on this, but it just, with a band that doesn't have a name, this is the problem. I mean, there's a few problems. You've got radio, which won't play anything new whatsoever. They won't even play anything new by Aerosmith or the Stones. So we don't stand any chance. We've hired radio promoters. There's really nothing you can do. You've got the classic rock, which is all the classic rock stations throughout the country, which are owned by Clear Channel. They've been told by some stupid accountant in some office in Utah that people of this demographic want to hear Hotel California 200 times a month. You know, and so this is all they do. They play the same 200 songs and they just rotate them. They don't bring in, which has really killed the genre, because there is a lot of good stuff out there, not just us. There are bands that that are good. They just they're not given anywhere to any venue to play for their music to be played on with the standard radio. So you've got one problem there. So no one will book you unless you have a name and you heard on the radio, because it's and the bands now going out on tour, you've got Live Nation handling it, and that sort of kills the genre, because they'll put the same old packages together, like Foreigner, Styx, and Night Ranger, Heart, so blah blah blah, and it's always these packages of these three bands, but they don't really need that third band on the bill. I mean, it's the third band on the bill, be it Night Ranger or whoever, is only going to bring in probably about 50 more people that aren't already fans of the first two bands anyway. I mean, they'll be part of bringing it in, but whoever you put on the bill from that era the fans are cross sort of pollinated there. I mean, so they're not seeding for the future, because eventually these classic rocks acts, they're going to retire, or the key person's going to die, and then they're not going to play anymore. So I mean, if Live Nation would say, all right, let's put a new unknown band on the bill with these guys, after 2 or 3 tours, they'd be ready to move up the ranks and start being second on the bill and eventually headlining. But that's not happening. So, and that's with America. I mean, and of course radio isn't playing it. So it's a very screwed up situation to try and get a band like Heaven and Earth out who doesn't have any hits. We don't have any really big names in the band, which is another thing. I mean, you put a band together with guys who've been in a few bands, that they can at least get booked. So we're not having much luck in America. But it's funny, I was talking to Fred Corey from Cinderella the other day, and he said, I'm glad to hear you going to Europe, because he said, this band will kill it in Europe. That's where you belong. And he said, the funny thing is, when you come back if you have a successful tour of Europe, you come back here, everyone will want you here now.
You know, it's interesting. I was actually just talking about a very similar thing with my wife last night, in that there was a point where the music changed, where it was really clear, was probably around 2000. I had never heard of Kid Rock before. And then I saw him on an awards show. And it was like the MTV Music Awards or something like that. And that was my first time I ever saw or heard of him. And it was on this massive show. And he played a song, and it then became a hit. So as opposed to the old days where you do a record, you go a tour opening for somebody, and then you do a second record and build a little more. And by the third record, you had a hit. Some record label paid a shit ton of money, put him on a massive award show, and made him a star.
Yeah.
And that to me is all of a sudden the music business got all fucked up, because that's ass backwards to me. And that seems like it's never kind of changed since then.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, hey, there's always been people in the business. The business has always been a business. I mean, my first manager with Sidewinder, it was a team, and the female of the team, her first job in the music business was working for Brian Epstein, hiring models to scream at the Beatles.
Oh wow!
So that was her first job in the business. So
funny.
They'd seat the front few rows with these hot models who'd scream, and of course everyone else would scream. You know, everyone's manipulated one way or the other.
It's true.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's. I mean, I remember Sade coming out. No one had ever heard of her, and just all of a sudden she's on this massive festival. It was one of the Live Aid or something. She did the one song, "Sweetest Taboo," and instantly a hit, because she's up. Everyone's like, "Who the hell is this?" She was good, but I mean, I don't feel she'd earned it. I mean, and it's funny because all these, we had this discussion just over the Grammys, which was just such a joke. All these people who won Best New Artist, they've been kicking around for donkey's years, and there's always a major label connection to them. It's not like these guys are the homegrown little darlings that they're presented to be. And I was doing a running commentary on my Facebook page of the Grammys, and people were cracking up. They were just saying that my commentary was better than the actual show. I mean, it started off, you had Beyonce, what the hell that was about. I mean, she's dressing like a teenager and trying to do this stupid thing, and I'm going, all right, this is rubbish. And then you have Lorde, who's everyone's making a fuss about, and I'm going, I could see a chick like this in every coffee shop in LA on a Saturday morning, whining away pathetically. And they say, but she's only 17. She wrote this song when she's 14. Doesn't matter. It's still crap. It's not like it's not like she's written Bohemian Rhapsody, for Christ's sake. It's a mindless 3-chord dirge. But you know, and it just got from bad to worse after that. With them, the final award, which is the most coveted album of the year, in an award show that's meant to be given out for excellence in music, was given to 2 DJs who dress up as robots.
Yeah.
It shows you how screwed up the business is. I mean, but yeah, there's, you know, Kid Rock being bought onto the thing and he instantly becomes a hit. Yeah, television is where it's at now. If you can get on television, you've got a halfway decent chance.
So with the state of the music business being what it is, what keeps you going?
Stupidity. Blind determination. I love playing, Brian. I love playing, and I love playing live. I I mean, I get a bit bored with recording. I go into it with all the best intentions, going, oh, this is great, and then rehearsing, we're writing, and then we actually get into the recording, and then it becomes tedious. It's live. I love playing live. So there's that. Also, I mean, I feel we do have a real chance now with Quarter Valley Records behind us. That's one of the things. It's just, I mean, like I said, it's very enjoyable for me to go out and play to that live, how do you say, the feedback you get from the crowd, that it becomes like the energy they throw at you and you throw back to them. It becomes a cycle, and it's just an amazing feeling. Nothing like it in the world.
One thing I love that you guys did on this record is you released it on vinyl.
Oh, yes.
And I'd love the vinyl's coming back. What are your thoughts on vinyl?
I love it as well. I didn't hear the album until, because I don't have a record player, and went round to the head of our record company's house, and he had a record player, and I was like, this is amazing. I mean, because we recorded this on tape.
Really?
The old analog tape. Yeah, we went in the studio and we used something called the clasp, which is you take the signal from the mixing board, everything goes into the mixing board, and then it goes into this this thing called the clasp, which sends the signal to the 24-inch tape machine, you know, with the old 2-inch tape, and it records off the sync head and then sends it back into Pro Tools. So you get the warmth and the saturation of tape, but then you get the how do you say, the convenience of being able to edit in Pro Tools. So you can actually drop the whole band in on the fly. If you've done a really good take up to the end of the guitar solo, and then there's a bit of faltering or something, you could actually the producer can take you back to about 30 seconds before. You just play along with it, and he can drop the whole band in seamlessly, which is great. You could never do that with tape before.
And did you record live like that, live on the floor, or was it all individual?
No, we recorded. We did record live. My solos were overdubbed. But and we did some overdubs. But the main thing was to get that. We were all in the studio at the same time, looking in each other's eyes, and getting that communication going, which is great. But yeah, so that was how it's meant to be heard. So when I went around to Bruce's house one day and I heard this on vinyl, I was like, whoa! It just blew me away. And I missed that. I missed it with CDs. I mean, you get CDs and you got to like squint at it to see what's written there. Whereas that was part of the experience with when you got a new album. My friends would be around and we all sit down and have some drinks or whatever, and we put the album on, and everyone would pass around the lyrics and this and the album cover. It was an event.
Like obviously, like everybody else, I have all my music on my phone, and what I was finding is that it was becoming a big mixtape because I would just keep on removing songs that were not my favorites. So I never had any full albums anymore. I would just have, 3-4 songs off each record, and it became a big mixtape. And so I found I was consuming more music than ever, but appreciating it less. So the idea of putting on a record, you have to listen to it, songs in order, the full side. It brought back a bit more of the music experience I had from my youth of, sitting and enjoying an entire record, which I had lost. So I think that's a wonderful side effect of vinyl, let alone the great sound.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. I mean, it was, but I think in that day, bands really concentrated on producing good songs. I mean, I think that art's been lost now. Someone will get like one or two, maybe one song that's good, and they'll just sling a load of crap around it just to get it out on an album.
Or they don't do an album anymore. They'll just record a song and put it on iTunes, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think if an album should tell a story, which this one sort of kind of does with Dig. When I got this deal, I was going through a hellish breakup. I broke up with the woman that I had a child with, and she had the child in Santiago, Chile. So I was going through this hellish breakup, and at the time, Joe Retter we just started this Heaven and Earth, and Joe Retter, the singer, would sold his place in in Ventura and wanted to look for something around my area, which is Woodland Hills. And I said, well, look, I've got this big house and I've got a spare room. Why don't you rent a room off me, and then it'll help us writing the album. So Joe moved in, and that sort of became the catalyst, because we really would, concentrate on. I'd be playing in the living room, and he'd come in and say, "Hey, what's that?" So we'd keep that riff and that kind of thing. But during that time that he first moved in, the poor guy. I mean, I'm angry, I'm depressed, and here's this guy who's very much just sort of like a peaceful, free spirit, comes in and there's this hell going on here. So he absorbed, I think, a lot of what I was going through. And if you listen to the album, like you say, in order, it starts off Victorious, which is about fighting, No Money, No Love. I don't know what love is anymore. House of Blues. You've got all these songs which are very sort of dark energy, and slowly coming out like to Rock and Roll Does, which is the sort of turning point, and then ending up with Live as One. So Howard Leese, Howard Leese said, because when I always give the tracks to Howard when I release an album, because he's done this. He used to do this. Record companies used to pay him to do this, but it's what they call sequence an album, which is what song goes first and second and third and so on. When I sent those tracks to Howard, he said, well, pretty much, I think in the order you recorded them, the order they were written, it tells a story. And it's a very elating album when you sort of, it's like, albums, it's not such a theme album as Hotel California or Dark Side of the Moon, but the idea is that there's, somewhat this ascent from depression and anger up into, spiritual elation. That might be a little lofty, but probably, that's a story.
That's really interesting.
That's the story we're selling anyway.
And that's really interesting that these are the order it was written, because you can't really get much darker than Waiting for the End of the World,
Well, that was sort of, I think, when I was sort of starting to come out of it a bit, and I was watching television one night, and the way I practice most of the time is I just sit in front of the television. I don't just sit there and do scales. Sit in front of the television, and I've got the amp plugged in, and I play along with the television. So the commercial comes on, I've got like 5 seconds to basically learn the theme and do it. It's great ear training. And when there's movie playing, if there's no music, I'll create my own soundtrack. And if there is music, I'll sort of get into pitch and play along with it. But like I said, it's great ear training. And I was watching this program on these survivalists who convinced that the Mayan calendar was right, and we're all going to, die. And they were building these bunkers in the desert, and they're like condos underground in old missile silos, costing $1 million each, and all this kind of thing. And people were buying this, but obviously it didn't happen. But I said to Joe, these guys are waiting for the end of the world. That's a great title. But maybe we can do something more on it, like when you're in a relationship and somebody and it breaks up, it's like you have this little world with that person. It's suddenly like Darth Vader's come and invaded your world. It just shatters everything. And so maybe we could sort of do a double sort of meaning here, double entendre sort of thing, where you're talking about the end of the world, someone waiting for the end of the world, but you're in a relationship and the end is coming. And it's going to be end. So that was what I threw at Joe, and he was great like that, because I'd go, all right, here's the music and here's the title, and he compared it later on to sort of like a homework assignment, because when the first one I threw at him was Back in Anger, and he said, well, I don't know how to write this, Stuart. He said, I'm not an angry person. I went, yeah, you are. Look at this, and he put them on TV, and there's these politicians getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar and getting away with it, and these kids being shot, drive-by shootings, and people getting off on technicalities and this sort of thing. I said, aren't you angry about this? He went, yeah, I am. And he went and wrote the words, and he sent them to a friend of his and said, man, this is dark for you, Joe. Yeah. So and then when I said, all right, your next one is I Don't Know What Love Is Anymore. And he was great. He'd just disappear into his room, and I'd hear just these ideas, and I said, "Can I hear it?" He went, "No," and he wouldn't let me hear it until he was happy with it. but a great lyricist. I mean, he's very, very talented in that department.
You mentioned briefly playing along with commercials and movies and writing your own score while you watched. Is scoring something you'd ever be interested in doing?
I would. I don't know if I'd be capable of doing it on my own. I'd have to bring in someone like Howard Leese or David Page, who's had some experience with this, to sort of lay the keys down. But yeah, it would be interesting. It'd be interesting. I mean, right now my focus is really on getting Heaven and Earth out. I mean, with this, I've been banging my head against the wall because just trying to get this thing out to where we can tour. And finally, we've got these anchor dates in England and the other festivals coming in. So this is great for us. We're going to get out there. But I mean, if I had sort of like 3 months off, I'd probably love to do something like that.
Tell me about the title of the record. Where does Dig come from?
Well, when Chuck Wright was great friends with Glenn Wexler. They've been friends since school days, I think. And when we went to meet with Glenn, he heard the music and he was knocked out about it. He said, "This is like something that's the album that Zeppelin and Deep Purple and all these guys never recorded, and it was just locked away in a vault for all this time." So he had this cover that he originally was going to do for Zeppelin, which was the Zeppelin being dug out the ground. And Jimmy Page's art director nixed it. But he said, "I've always wanted to do this, but it's going to be expensive. I've never had a record company that's had the budget to do it." But the idea was the guitar being dug up. It's been buried for a lot of years, and it's being lifted out of the ground. And so he said, at the time, I think I was going to call the album Back in Anger, because a journalist had asked me once, said, "Don't you think rock and roll is an angry young man's game?" And I said, "I'm still angry." And, about just things in life. And I think you give that up, you give up the fight, you might as well give up completely. So that was the original title. Then it was going to be Waiting for the End of the World. But then when Glenn came with his title, he said, you should just call it Dig. And that double entendre, again, you dig the album, but we're digging. It's an archaeological dig. So that's where it came out. That's where it came from.
Well, Stuart, thank you very much for your time. This has been a great conversation. And I really wish you luck with the tour, and hope you get some success in North America. Yeah,
and that's what we're looking forward to. I mean, getting out and playing in Canada and the States. I mean, but just have to see how it goes.
And there you have it, my conversation with Stuart Smith. It was a great talk. Make sure you take a second and go to iTunes and subscribe. I'll have another show for you next Monday. And as always, you can reach out on Twitter @TheDoubleStop. We'll see you next week.